It's not a fun time to live in, but it refreshes the Republic.
A few weeks ago, my interview with George saw over 500,000 views and got almost 4,000 comments. So today on Global Macro Update, I'm going to ask your questions, and we'll see how George reacts. George, thanks for coming back and doing this follow-up. I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm going to read the first comment or question is from Gasama Kawusu, who says, if Russia has lost in Ukraine, how the hell can they wage war in Europe?
They can't. That was my point. The Russian army has shown itself as having limited capability. And this is one of the elements of the discussions being held now. Trump is not arguing to the Russians, but is playing on it. You guys lost. You're in the weak spot. We can help you out. The Russians are torn between, now let's give it another round. We'll have a better negotiating position. How can I get a better negotiating position? In poker, there's a throwdown. And at the end of the night, you're going to put it all in if you're losing. Try to recoup. And in negotiations, it's very important to remember, everybody is at one and the same time great friends and accusing the other guy of being a thief. And just, this is negotiations, guys. We'll see if it works. We may not work. But we really have to be aware of the fact that everybody now is making their moves relative to negotiations. And they will try to say, I don't need this deal. And of course not. I mean, he's not, but he failed in Europe. And that's what we have to remember. The key thing is he invaded a country much smaller than his and failed to take all of it. Took 20%.
There's a similar comment that follows on. Quite contrary to this, Putin got away with many goodies. Ukrainian land, weakening China, USA on his side, losing Syria but gaining Libya, direct access to North Korea, sidelining Zelensky completely, NATO staring at an existential crisis. What more do you want?
Well, not to lose over 1 million troops and get only 20% of the country that you wanted to take is one thing that he could get. As for him having pressure on China and making it decline, that's not what happened. China declined itself economically. Its internal economic problems did it. The Russians didn't do it. The Russians are now in a position they have to somehow demonstrate their credibility as a geopolitical power after this event. But I would rather be an American than a Russian at this point. During Vietnam, I'd rather be a Russian than an American. Well, not so, but that. But when you lose a war, your status is declining precisely because countries wonder what you can do to them. Are you really as tough as you look? So he's trying to prove that he's tough, but I don't think he gained very much out of it.
Following on that one, Silverio Sierra writes to us, you state Russia isn't a superpower because they could not subdue the Ukrainians, but neither could the U.S. beat the Afghan rebels, nor the Russians, or the British for that matter. Does that qualify them from being superpowers?
That's a very good question. The difference is they weren't on our border. We fought those wars not in order to defeat the country. I'm not clear why we fought those wars or what our intentions were. But if we lost it, it didn't mean that our frontiers were threatened. This war was fought on the frontier of Russia by a former part of Russia, and they couldn't take it. So it was different. But at the same time, what a superpower is not someone who doesn't have defeats. We all have defeats, but has the resources to recover. So now the question is, we recovered from Vietnam, noisily and angrily and everything else. What is the internal situation inside of Russia? Russia has suffered a great deal in this war. Many people died. The economy went south. The internal structures included a coup d'etat, an attempted coup d'etat. The people who staged a coup were killed in an air crash. So the question really isn't what they gained in Libya. I'm sure it's what they're going to do with it. The question now is what's happening inside of Russia. Just as the question was what's happening inside of America after Vietnam, after Afghanistan, we should be spending more time looking at what the Russian people are thinking at this point. And I think we would find that there's serious questioning going on. And this is not Stalin's Russia. Opinions are addressed. The structure of oppression is thankfully gone. The oligarchs have a great deal of power. They were really hurt in this operation. Of course, most of their money is put in American banks or something, European banks, so they don't have to worry about paying the rent. But there is a great deal of unhappiness inside of Russia. So the more interesting question is, how does Russia evolve after this? We saw how we evolved after Vietnam. And for a long time after that, we had internal problems, but we managed. It was not on our border. This is different.
Great answer. Next question, Dmitry Trunikov. Interesting talk, George, but I don't understand. What is the role of NATO in Europe in this new world order?
I don't understand either. NATO was created at a time when Western Europe was in shambles, when the Soviet army was at its most powerful top. They'd taken Eastern Europe. A line was drawn through Europe. And the question for the United States was, can we tolerate Russia conquering Europe? That was a possibility then. If they conquered Europe, they'd have a ports on Atlantic and they could challenge us in the Atlantic Ocean. We badly wanted to structure something, and we created NATO. And NATO was an American organization, always under American command. The Supreme Allied Commander was American almost to the end. And the European countries sent their armies, such as they are, and the United States sent a huge force. And we could say it's NATO. As the Cold War drew down, NATO became irrelevant. The purpose of it was gone. Russia was not going to conquer Europe. They're not going to get to the Atlantic. And NATO fell into disrepute. And this is one of the things Trump's understood, which is that NATO is no longer an instrument because it was never really united. You couldn't count on the countries that were committed to do what they had to do. So at this point in the history, it's a nice place to go every year, have a dinner, a conference. Every politician who can't find a place at home gets a job at NATO. It's a nice place. But it is not a functional entity. It's not what it used to be, except for the Russians. They use it as a boogeyman.
Interesting. Okay, then you're going to love this next question. You said during the interview, Europe is fragmented in chaos. And that's probably true. But the U.S. isn't united either, my friend. And we Europeans get together fast because we don't hate each other.
I was born in Hungary. And having not grown up there, but grown up in Little Budapest in the Bronx, New York, where everybody was Hungarian, the notion that we don't hate each other is alien. I spent much of my life in Europe. And you go to a Paris bar in a working class district, and boy, you find a lot of hatred. They have the same problems we have: immigration, integrating, but they also have international problems. Hungary is still bitter at Romania for taking Transylvania in the First World War. And if you look at Germany internally, the tension within Germany between the right and left is intense. France is always an argument going on. So I have seen that in terms of the intensity of the internal disputes, I, as a European born and very familiar with Europe, they have different arguments about different things. But they argue soccer, we argue baseball, and they argue different politics, and it's pretty much the same. We are in an intensely different time in the United States. We have a history of transitions. I've written on this. And we are in the transitional period. I have a book called The Storm Before the Calm. We are in the storm. And every 50 years or so, we go through a period where the old system is declining in the sense that it's become obsolete. A new system is appearing, and those who were from the old system find the new system obscene, and the others find them reactionary. So we are in a period of intense internal crisis, but it's how we grow. Our people talk about guardrails and norms. Our nation was founded by violating norms, guide rails. And he was hated. George Washington was hated in the United States by the loyalists who felt that this was violating the principles. And every 50 years, every generation or two, we go through this period of violating norms. It's not a fun time to live in. Actually, I enjoy it, but most human beings wouldn't. It's not a fun time to live in, but it refreshes the republic. The last time we had it was Ronald Reagan. We were in a period of storm during the 70s, economic downturn and everything, and he brought in a new order. We had Roosevelt. He took the old economic order and in 100 days, even without Elon Musk there, wrecked the entire banking system. And when the Supreme Court resisted him, he threatened to stuff the Supreme Court, get two people out. So this period of rage is unique, and you can't judge the United States over time in the same way as you're judging now. So at this point, I'd say it's very intense in the United States. But when I go to Europe and I go into countries, the politics there are pretty tough too.
If you like these discussions, please give us a like and be sure to subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate your support. Now let's get back to our conversation with George Friedman. Alma 1893 writes, how can you say Russia is weakened if Russia's economy is growing faster than the United States economy?
This is what we call in economics, if I was an economist, a dead man bounce, dead cat bounce. They went down so hard and so fast, they're bouncing, of course. I mean, that always happens. So relative growth rates depend on the circumstances from which they're recovering. The Russians will grow very fast because much of the infrastructure is still there and they don't have to invest to bring it up. They just have to have consumption, distribution, and everything else. In the United States, we didn't have a dead cat bounce. We've been on a fairly steady path, okay? Not for investors, but for the rest of us. Life has been unchanged. So yes, the Russian economy is growing now very fast, but you expect that after a war.
Kate Garrett writes, you're not concerned that Putin is going to go unpunished for this war?
Punishment is something you deal out to children, not the heads of great powers, if you wish. If you want to punish him, you're going to have to give your life for it. In other words, how can we punish him? Do we do assassination teams? If we punish all of Russia, will they rearm, refurbish, feel themselves alienated? You make peace with your enemies. And if your intent is to punish them, beat them hard. We didn't beat them hard. They beat themselves. So we should get away from the idea of punishing and remember what we did with Japan and Germany. We rebuilt them. We changed them. One of the things the United States does very well that other countries don't is when they win a war, they turn them into allies, rebuild them, buy their products. So punishment of Russia would only endanger us. I also don't see how to punish them.
With Japan and with Germany at the end of World War II, those two countries were very solidly beat, right? I mean, severely beaten, as you indicate. And there was a change of government. Whereas with Russia today, Putin is still going to be, he was there yesterday. He's probably going to be there tomorrow. Can you make them an ally? I mean, will Putin actually think that the U.S. is his ally when we change presidents every 4 or 8 years?
There was a great debate in the United States in the First World War. How can we be an ally of England? England that was our oppressor. England was this and that because the national interest demanded it. So there's tensions between countries on certain levels, but it doesn't prevent them from being an ally. We couldn't be an ally with Germany until Hitler was gone. We couldn't be an ally with Japan, while that emperor remained, but the regime didn't change. Changed. So countries aren't people. They don't hold grudges for a long time unless they're free to. Russia's a nation. We have to have a relationship with them. As I said before, the question is, does Putin survive this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not meaning live or dead, but because the regime does. But you have to be able to understand that you make peace with your enemies. It's interesting to me that the left used to be saying, we're not cops of the world. It was a phrase that was used in the 60s. And it used to say that we should be more accommodating. Now it's the left that's saying, how can you accommodate this? How can you do this? And the right that's saying, so I love America. Mere hypocrisy is not a problem.
We have a long-standing history of it. We're coming down to the last few questions here. One is more of a comment that I just would love to get your thoughts on. XYZ Arrow says, the coming isolation of the U.S. will cripple the country since it is 100% dependent on trade with the world, and without trade, the U.S. empire will crumble. And what's left of the U.S. minus its empire? Well, pretty much nothing.
Well, that's hopeful thinking by some. Well, we do not depend on 100% of our income on exports. In fact, we're a great importing country. And what will they do without us? If the United States crumbled, there'd be a worldwide crash. Not only does the dollar stabilize the global currency, but our trading system is one of the foundations of the international system. The idea that the United States is about to crumble is a wishful thinking on the part of many people.
Mm-hmm.
This is far lower a crisis than the Great Depression or the other things we had politically in wars, okay? We have to put this in context. Uh, Countries don't love us. In the past 100 years, many countries didn't love us. The Americans have the great advantage. They can not care. So not liking us and hoping for a downfall disappoints many people.
I'll just set this last question up with a comment that the late, great Harold Malmgren made to me several months ago. We were talking about what was going to happen. The President Trump hadn't taken office yet. I asked him a couple of questions about what he thought was going to happen. And he looked at me and he said, Trump is unpredictable. And that simple statement, I think, was one of the most insightful comments that I've ever heard about the president. It really helped me rethink how to look at the administration today.
He's a poker player.
Mm-hmm.
A poker player, when he's got a great hand, looks glum, goes to the bathroom, sits down again, is not interested. When you have a lousy hand and too much money in it, you look confident and great and happy. I see him as a great poker player. I play poker and I'm not great at it, but always pay little attention to what appears at his face. Always pay little attention to what he says. Look at the cards, count the odds, see the money. And he's that player. He gives you the face he wants when he wants to give it. And he is the greatest bluffer in the world. And so what it's saying says he says things and then takes them back. He's bluffing. And if you understand him, I don't think he's unpredictable, but you can read the cards by seeing which way he's moving and how he's behaving. And if you've ever played high stakes poker, which I have, you learn very quickly. And this guy, he grew up in Queens. I grew up in Queens, not far from him. He was in a good neighborhood. I was in a bad neighborhood. But in Queens, we knew how to play poker. In the Bronx, we knew how to play poker. The problem is that people went to Harvard don't know how to play poker. They take people seriously at what they say. So to me, to many in America, he's an outlandish figure. To me, he's like my friend Dominic. Dominic could not figure out what he was doing. And then you figured out what he's doing because he had these tells. And Trump has tells. Tells are those things that people do Well, they get a good hand and they go like this. Play with him poker long enough, and he has his tells. So he can be read. He's not unpredictable, but he tries to be.
This happens all the time whenever we talk politics at all with anyone. We get feedback, whether it's emails or in the comments section. Half of the people assume that you're a huge Trump supporter, and then the other half assume that you voted for Kamala Harris. And in fact, you said in our last discussion that you did not vote for President Trump, which made everyone assume you voted for Kamala Harris. Did you?
Well, I wrote a piece today where I pointed out that I haven't voted in 30 years. I was a professor and I worked for the government. And in both places, I was unable to do the work I wanted to do, which is see the world objectively, call the play-by-plays, and not take sides. Howard Cosell is a great commentator this time because he wasn't rooting for the team. He was hired by the team. And Howard Cosell could sit there and say, that pitcher's tired, man. They should blow out. My approach to my life, my service is my vote and what I say must be indifferent to the outcome, must not be rooting for one side or the other. I will criticize the media. I don't consider myself media. The media, a New York Times, is every day an editorial page on how terrible Trump is. This is not what my function is. My function is to call the play-by-play as well as I can. I'll make my mistakes, but not to root for either side. That's hard because I root for my country. But even there, I have to try to call the plays. So in the case of this war, I predicted the war. I said the Russians had to do this. I was wrong. They couldn't do it. But it doesn't matter that I'm wrong or right. I wasn't rooting for them or against them. What I try to do in my work is to chronicle. I'm an intelligence guy. I come from that world. The problem in the university is you're allowed to do intelligence so long as you agree with everybody else.
Mm.
The problem in the government is you agree with the guy above you. I did something very crazy. I said, I'm going to do this in the private sector. I loved my discipline. I loved the work I did. But I decided to make a business of it. Given that I knew nothing about business, this seemed easy. But we did it, and it's worked. And the point is, I'm free to call the play-by-plays. I don't have to say which side I'm on. So if it appears that I appear to be for Trump, I'm simply trying to explain Trump. And I don't think he's a fool. I don't think politicians are fools. I think they act the role they have to act. When you become president, you have to have enormous discipline. You have to rise to the presidency, defeat other candidates. Stupid people don't do that. Now, you may not be a nice person, but you're not stupid. And what I try to do is look at these players, see their failures, their successes, but never underestimate them. Not look at people, look at countries. Because in the end, the president is what the country produces. Donald Trump is a production of the United States. Now, there's a minority that didn't vote for him and doesn't like him and hates him and so on. That's what we are. But he does what he has to do. Because if you don't do what you have to do, you don't stay president. You don't succeed. Wishful thinking doesn't govern. So I regard all these people as smart enough to be sitting on top of everybody else. Number one sign that they're smart. Number two is they like being there. Number two reason they're smart. And so they try to make the best moves they can. Now, when you look at what moves you can make, first you understand what do you need? What are your imperatives? What do you have to achieve? The second thing you look at, what are your constraints? What can't you do? What's impossible? And then you craft your policy based on knowing what you do. So Putin thought he had to invade Ukraine to demonstrate that he's a great power. It was imperative. He miscalculated his capabilities. Now, what's his imperative? To recover from what he failed. If you look at it simply in that way and treat politicians respectfully, which in democracies is not allowed, you have to have contempt for them, then you can understand them. So I try to bring this to bear into my work. So it always seems I'm in favor of somebody, but I'm just analyzing them as they think of themselves. I try to put myself in their heads. And sometimes it's unpleasant heads, but you have to do the job.
So how would you rate Trump's performance so far? I mean, he's clearly trying to change the system.
The previous system was obsolete, didn't fail. After 50 years, it's obsolete. So, for example, we had a cultural war. The egalitarianism that it began with under Roosevelt, who's loved by blacks because he finally spoke for them, turned into a hyper egalitarianism where it wasn't blacks that had to be in it. Women had to be equal, homosexuals had to be equal, transgender people had to be equal, and it was not equal opportunity, it was an equal outcome. So it was not a question of do you have a chance to get into Harvard, but you have to be allowed to get into it. It became it became the reductio ad absurdum of the previous era. And that's how eras end. It reaches the reductio ad absurdum. And it was unsupportable. Polls said it was inflation. I don't believe it. It was a culture war. It's still raging. And the previous culture, from Roosevelt on, did magnificent things in society and culture, in raising the working class, in making sure of central government. But the reality is that the federal government had reached the level of reductio ad absurdum. The complexity, the size, the inability to function was a serious matter. Now, when Roosevelt came in, he faced a banking system that had failed, a financial system that had failed. So in the first 100 days, he went nuts, wrecking the banking system, overthrowing everything. The Supreme Court tried to stop him. He tried to stop the Supreme Court by packing it. It was wild. But he felt he had 100 days because he knew that the opposition would come back. This had to be done, and it was going to be done against the rules to get it done. I see this as his 100 days. I also see his 100 days coming to an end. He's made a lot of moves. He's done a lot of things. Now he's backing off on a lot of things. Okay? I don't think Elon Musk is going to be there that much longer. But he had to get going the principle that the federal government is dysfunctional. And he got it going. He got radically going. He had to end the Cold War. The Russians were no longer the Soviets. Stalin is not Putin. Very different people. We were spending a huge amount of money, taking risks. Perhaps we can reach accommodation. Now, the Democrats used to be the party of accommodation. The Republicans were the hard anti-communists. So it's a wonderful world, and we're all hypocrites. But the important thing is that he came in Roosevelt style because he's the first president of this era. He's the storm. After that will come to calm. And Roosevelt was referred to as the man, a great columnist said, he's the least competent president we have ever had in history. He was considered a dictator. He was accused of using the 100 days to make himself a dictatorship. So when I look at these things, I say, when Andrew Jackson, who is at this point, comes in, he's in the same position. Abraham Lincoln is a monkey who can't read. So the demonization, the urgency of the president to do something while he still has a chance before the opposition forms. I see Trump in that light. Now, how he'll be looked at? Well, he'll be looked at back as a Jackson or a Lincoln Lincoln is God, Jackson is a monster, whatever it is. Okay? Both of them had trial fights at the Supreme Court, broke all the rules, all the norms. This is that president. His historical view, I don't know what they'll say in history because I don't know if he'll succeed,
Right.
but I think I know what he's trying to do.
George, always appreciate my time with you. Thank you for helping us understand, because at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do. You're just trying to figure this out.
I just make this up as I go along.
Yeah, I know that's not true. George Friedman from Geopolitical Futures. Thank you again.
Thank you.